sorry, phone call. I'm just starting example number 2. When there's an equal sign, you have to do it a little differently, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now, okay? We still need to find the least common denominator, okay? So on example 2, let's look at our least common denominator. Okay, I need a 5 for this right here. And they both have an x minus 2, so I just have to write it down once. So my least common denominator for this problem is 5 and then an x minus 2. You don't remember, if they both have one, you only have to write it down once. Okay, so here's my least common denominator. Now, this is where things get different. And if there's an equal sign in your problem, you just multiply the top number by your least common denominator. Okay, and they show this there in red on example number 2. So right here, I'm going to multiply this by my least common denominator. Right here, I'm going to multiply this by my least common denominator. And here, I'm also going to multiply this by my least common denominator, okay? Notice I'm multiplying the top of every fraction by my least common denominator. Okay, so let's write down what those results are, okay? We have an x times a 5x minus 10, right? Isn't that what I have there? If I distribute a 5x minus 10, I have an x times a 5x minus 10, okay? I'm actually going to pause right there. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it so, I'm going to write it out like this. I'm just going to write it out big and put it over these. I'll show you why in a second. I changed my mind. So we're not going to distribute. We're just going to write it out here. Plus 1 times. So I have to put 1 times something, or can I just put what it is? Times by, right? I don't need the 1. And I put it over what's there. It equals x minus 2 is on the bottom of this fraction. I'm going to do 2 times 5 times x minus 2. So what I'm doing is I'm writing the top of the fraction times the least common denominator. The top of the fraction times the least common denominator, and the top of the fraction times the least common denominator, right there. And then I put them over what they have already. Okay? Now, the good news is I can now start to cross things out if possible. Okay? That's why I left it like this and didn't distribute. This can be crossed out with this. This 5 can be crossed out with this 5. And this x minus 2 can be crossed out with this x minus 2. Okay, now let's combine what we have. X times a 5 plus an x minus a 2, and that equals a 10. Okay, 5x plus x minus 2 equals 10. All right, now let's combine like terms. I have 6 x's. I'm going to add 2, right? That'll go away. So I have 6x equals 12. Divide, and x would be 2. And I'd plug it in to see if it works. Okay, so let's do another one of these examples. I know they're super confusing, so let's do another one. Thankfully, we still have quite a lot of time on this to do this. All right, so example number 3. Example number 3 says on page 821, 3 over x minus 7 plus 1. I'm going to put 1 over 1 just so it's a fraction. Okay, equals, there's that very important equal sign that's going to tell us we need to do this a little differently than the previous sections. X squared minus 9x plus 14. Okay, what have we been doing every time we have a polynomial like this? Every time we've had an x squared situation, we've been factoring that, right? So let's go ahead and do that. I would have an x and an x. To make 14, I could use a 7 and a 2 maybe. Could I make that into a negative 9? Sure, if I did a negative 7 and a negative 2, right? So let me rewrite it up here. So I'm just trying to make it nice and neat so it's easy to understand. So I factored that there, okay? Now, let's figure out our least common denominator. We'll have an x minus 7 for this one. Do I really need a 1? Because anything times 1 is just the same thing, right? So I don't really even need to use this one. This one already has an x minus 7, so that's taken care of, but it needs an x minus 2 in my common denominator, right? So if they have, remember, if they have the same thing, you write it down once, and then you write down anything that's left, and that makes your least common denominator. So that's my least common denominator right here. Remember, in this method, I'm going to multiply the top of the fraction by the least common denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it down here. Okay, and I'm going to put it over what's on the bottom already. Then I'm going to multiply the top. Do I really need to multiply by 1, you guys? Can I just use the least common? We're going to multiply the top 1 times the least common denominator and put it over what's there already. The top times the least common denominator and put it over what's there already. So let me review. I took the least common denominator and I multiplied it by each number on the top. But I left the bottom exactly the way it was. Okay? So now, because this is an equal sign, remember we're doing these a little differently, you can cross out. So I can get rid of this and this. I can't get rid of anything there. I can get rid of this and the x minus 2's as well, right? Notice everything disappears on the bottom. We really like that. That is very, very happy for us. Let's go ahead and distribute here. 3 times x. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. We can go ahead and FOIL this. Firsts, outsides, insides, lasts, and here we have an 8. Okay? Notice I've got that x squared. That means I'm probably going to need to put everything on one side so I can factor, right? That's usually what we do when we have an x squared situation. So let's go ahead and move things together. I got an x squared. I have a 3x, a negative 2x, and a negative 7x. So that's what? Negative 6x? Did I do that right? I added my like terms. Okay? I had a 3, a negative 2, and a negative 7x. So I added those together. I got a negative 6. So we've taken care of that and that. A negative 6 plus a 14. Okay, so 14 minus 6 is 8. Is that right? Is that right? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, equals 8. Oh, that's weird. Okay. All right, equals 8. So then I'm going to go ahead and subtract 8 from both sides. And I get x squared minus 6x. Oh, 8 minus 8 just goes away, right? So x squared minus 6x equals 0. Now, our very last step for us to do is to go ahead and factor that out so we know our answer. So x can be taken out. I'd have an x minus a 6. So my solutions would be 0 for the x and positive 6. And I would have to check those to make sure they actually worked. If one of them didn't work, don't write it down. If neither of them work, put no solution. Okay? And that is section 12.7. Watch the video again if you need it. It's a pretty confusing section, just like last section was a pretty confusing section too. And you can always call me. I'm super happy to help in person with FaceTime or with email or with any of those things. So just let me know because I would love to help you. That's my job. I'm your teacher. So let me know. Okay? All right. Have a good day.